Hello, Jennifer. Can you guys hear me all right? Okay, awesome. I see your message here, Swap Neil. No worries. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, just trying to get my audio figured out real quick.
No worries. Hi, Christopher. All right, we'll let folks trickle in, and I'll just open the floor to you guys. If you're new here, I do this every week, sort of AMA style. Ask me anything. My background as of the past 12 years has been in recruiting, running a full desk boutique recruiting firm, servicing primarily venture-backed tech companies. And in a prior life, I was in software product development, product management. And in a prior life, I was in mechanical engineering. And I'm actually in kind of a transition right now, like I think a lot of folks are. I think recruiting is changing quite a bit. And so I've been part of the JSC or the NSA maybe a year and a half ago, and I moderated two JSCs. I think most of the folks coming in here are from the NSA community. And so I'm familiar with the playbook, the book, the framework. But I started this maybe a year ago just to kind of give back. And I realized that there's a lot of either misconceptions or just a lack of understanding or clarity around that black box that is recruiting. And so I give back in terms of giving my perspective with the ultimate goal of sort of helping folks navigate their job search more effectively and at least temper their expectations to help you ride sort of those ebbs and flows, if nothing else, emotionally. So I don't have anything planned today other than just ask me anything. Happy to share a few stories if that's interesting at all, but I want to make good use of your guys' time. So feel free to just chime in with a question, scenario, either in the chat or just speak up and share what you've got to say, and we can go from there. I'll let folks in as they come in, and that's my quick intro.
Thanks, Eric. I appreciate the time. Just a couple, this is my first time sitting in on this. So are the recordings of this available within the JSC network or anywhere?
That's a good question. I do record this and we do make it available on our YouTube channel.
Okay.
And so there's a bunch of past episodes that have been recorded. In fact, I've taken not all of them, but I've taken a lot of those transcriptions from those episodes and I've transcribed them and put them into a bot. So you can actually ask the bot what you would ask me, and it's decent, it doesn't talk entirely in my voice, but it's not bad in terms of just getting some information. So yeah,
And is that
that's
bot available on the website as well?
let me see. Let me see if I can dig it up for you. It should have been there should have been a link when you signed up on the Coffee with a Recruiter landing page.
Oh, okay.
You should have gotten an email that included that link. And I'll tell you, I don't maintain it. So that's what I was saying. I transcribed, there was a bunch. I don't know how many I transcribed, and I popped it into that bot. And maybe it doesn't get too much use because I think folks would just rather talk to me in person, or through Zoom on a weekly basis. But I'll dig it up and I'll send it to the group after this.
I guess one of my questions would be, and this might be something you get all the time, but if we're trying to do cold outreach to a recruiter, what are some things that you've seen work well for cold outreach, and like what are some like ick when people reach out to you that you just like don't want to talk to them?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a pretty common question. So, and I've said this before. Part of the value or insight that I can add is sort of my own recruiter perspective. After doing this for more than a decade. So part of that perspective is I can share with you what I see most people do, and I can share with you what the minority of people do. And as a function of it being a minority, it kind of sticks out, right? It becomes a pattern interrupt in the recruiter's dashboard or day, right? So as far as cold outreach, most people, they send a quick LinkedIn message. Sorry. Oftentimes it's not quick. It's actually a paragraph, often copied and pasted with a tweak or two. And I get it. I understand why job seekers do that because there's efficiencies in that. And it's very common that people do that. It's common that people lead with an ask. Depending on the recruiter, right, that could be a little bit off-putting, right? You never know who's on the other line, on the other end of the receiving the message. But I'll share with you what most people do, and that's what most people do. That's mostly what I see.
And sorry, what do you
What
mean
most people
by
don't
an
do,
ask?
oh, and ask like, oh, hey, can I have 30 minutes of your time to talk about this opportunity? Yeah. Or or can you point me to the right direction? Like who's in charge of this? Who's the hiring manager for this rec? Or just an ask, right? Leading with an ask. And it's like as a recruiter, like I get that all the time. And why would I entertain that ask for you when I don't know anything about you and you're leading with an ask? So yeah. So that's what most people do. That's what most people do. What most people don't do is prime the contact in advance. And what I mean by priming them is interacting with them, let's say through Facebook, not Facebook, but LinkedIn, commenting on their posts, engaging with their content, providing some unique or helpful insight in sort of that non-threatening, non-asking sort of environment. And most folks don't prime the contact like that. I don't see that. But when I do see it, I certainly pay more attention because it's no longer a cold outreach. It becomes a bit warmer. I won't say warm, but it can be warm, right? Depending on the priming that you do. So let's say, for example, I don't know, Netflix. There's an opportunity at Netflix that you've come across. You've identified the recruiter or the hiring manager that presumably has some influence or decision making around that opportunity, and they can help you navigate that or even get you an interview, right? Once you've identified that person, don't just find them on LinkedIn and shoot them a cold email. I would prime them a little bit. Maybe try to look at their profile, see what kind of content they're creating or engaging with, and then engage with that content so that your name and your picture shows up. And then eventually, when you do reach out to them, your name isn't a complete new name to them, right? And who knows, maybe you even get into a conversation with them about XYZ topic, right? And maybe you teach them something, or maybe you impress them in some way or another. It maybe doesn't have to be a dramatic impression, but it's something more than the majority does. And so by doing that, you kind of stick out. I hope that helps.
Yeah, can I? I think, one of the things I'm doing is, yes, sometimes I will reach out to the recruiter or, someone that I can tell is in the team from the people on LinkedIn. But I think, what you're saying makes sense. But like in those cases, I don't really have a relationship with that person. And they do say, oh, don't do that. You don't reach out to cold contacts and that sort of thing. But it's almost like we have no choice, right? We have to try different things. Some people will actually answer, not all of them do. But so I guess, is there really like among recruiters, thinking that people just absolutely should not be doing that, should not be doing a cold
No,
outreach?
no, not at all. Not at all. Not at all. Certainly you can do cold outreach. I mean, but there's certain things that grab people's attention, right? I don't
Hmm.
know about you, but if I don't know if any of you get like sort of like emails that are, where people are trying to
Yeah,
solicit
yeah,
or just selling some sort of, right?
right,
Like it's the same situation, right? Like
right.
what sticks out to you? What catches your eye? What gives you enough for you to click and open the email, right? I mean, there's
Right.
different tricks you can do, right? And not everybody does this. So like sometimes people name drop. It's like,
Mhm.
oh, Steve, blah blah blah, thought that we should connect. And oh, Steve. Especially if it's Steve, like somebody that I know, then obviously I'll be more apt to open it because there's some sort of loose connection there, right? I mean, so that's a little tactic that some people do. Not a lot of people do it,
Mhm.
right? So if you can think deeply about if you have some sort of first, second degree connection, ideally it's
Mhm.
a first degree connection, mutual connection between you and the person you're reaching out to. And if you can name drop, like in a meaningful way, right? That could work because a lot of people don't do that. The other thing too is, and this is a little bit as an aside, sometimes you don't know what the working relationship is with people. So let's say you know that you have a mutual relationship with Steve or whoever, right? Between you and the let's say the recruiter or hiring manager. Let's say Steve is in the middle and you're trying to drop Steve's name as somebody that'll catch the recruiter's eye so that they'll open up. You don't know what the relationship is.
Mhm.
This recruiter may have had a terrible experience with Steve and trusts nothing that has anything to do with Steve. So you don't know.
Right. Yeah.
And so similarly, when you're interviewing, if you can, even just as a matter of conversation, try to understand the interpersonal relationships between the team members that you're interviewing with. A quick example is, oh, okay, so Mr. Recruiter or Mrs. Recruiter, how long have you been working with Jennifer, the hiring manager? Oh, I just started working with her. Versus, oh, I've worked with Jennifer for 10 years now. I've recruited on every job opening she's had. I've built 5 of her teams, right? So you can start to get an understanding of like what the relationships are and just either interpersonal or even the professional working relationships. And those questions, they might seem benign on the surface and just small talk, but they're actually very valuable as a candidate to help you sort of navigate that the process and the relationships. It's a sales, obviously it's a sales process, right? And depending on the interview process, it could be especially at higher levels, it could be quite a complex sales process. And so navigating that is different from interviewing for like an entry level or minimum wage job, right? It's not that's not a complex sale typically, right? But if you're interviewing for a more senior professional, even executive level role, it's a very complex sale. And there's a lot of different things that you have to navigate. So as an aside.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Part of my problem is I'm looking to get into either of a few industries that I've never worked in. I don't have contacts. I've gone to a few people here and there as I see that maybe they have someone in common, just looking at where people have worked at and so on. So
Yeah.
that's where I end up having to do that cold outreach, which yeah, it's just awkward all
Yeah,
around.
it can be a bit awkward. I found that recruiters are hard to get a hold of, um, typically. But if you can start to network your way in, and maybe you don't start with the hiring manager, maybe you
Mm-hmm.
start with a peer, right? And a lot of times, you know, peers, especially if they're not building or leading or managing teams, they probably don't get approached as much. And if you could buy a coffee for that person or meet them on a Zoom or whatnot, you can get a lot of information and even sort of you can even develop a relationship and develop sort of an internal champion even in just one coffee meeting, or you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So you could even look at that networking opportunity as like it's a pseudo interview, right? Because if you can convince them that you're credible, that they would go out and advocate on your behalf or even help you navigate internally. If you can sell them on you, like, now you have an internal, and they might not have that much direct influence, which is fine, but they can give you a lot of information and they can even help you just navigate to the right person. And even if they can't do that, they can at least help you identify who they think might be the right person, right? So they can help you
Mm-hmm.
validate you.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it takes time to do that. It takes effort and time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Right. Okay. Thank you.
I remember going to a networking event a long, long time ago. This is like an in-person networking event. And I remember meeting this guy. And at the time I was in business school and I met this guy. He was a younger guy. I think he was like a freshman or sophomore at the time. And I was talking with him. And towards the end of our conversation, he asked me a question that still sits with me today. He asked me, "Is there anyone here that you think I should get to know?" I said, "Oh, that's a brilliant question." Because one, it gives him a sense of, you know, where how well I know the group there. And assuming I do know the group well there, I would help him navigate that. It's like, oh, you need to talk to Sarah because of this, and this, because you guys share XYZ. Here's your commonality, right? And so instead of him just walking off and being, hey, nice to meet you, Eric, talk to you next time, he asked me that question. And I was like, that's a brilliant question. Because I've already spent whatever 10 minutes talking with him, getting to know him a little bit. And then when he's asking me that question, assuming that maybe I do know other people there, then he can sort of make introductions, right? Assuming that he values, assuming I have some, assuming that he assumes that I have some sort of social or professional capital within that networking within that group, right? He can leverage that. So anyway, I thought that was a brilliant question. So I guess the point being is like at the end of a networking meeting or coffee or conversation, I would end with that. Is there anybody else at the company or whatever that you think I should meet or I should talk with? And sometimes they'll be open to making the introduction, and sometimes they're not, right? But either way, they might be able to point you in that direction.
Thank you.
Is there an average length for the recruiting and hiring process these days, or is that an impossible question?
And it's a difficult question, and obviously it varies, but maybe I can give some insight into why it might vary. Where I've seen interview processes vary, there's a few things, right? It could vary. It could vary as a function of whether they've ever hired for that position before, which is common for earlier stage companies. Earlier stage companies, it's highly probable that it's the first time interviewing for XYZ position, right? And so they're trying to figure out what they need. Meanwhile, they're building their org structure, right? So that could be one factor. I think a common factor right now is that companies are just, a lot of them are sitting on their hands and just waiting out sort of the uncertainty, and maybe they do know what they're looking for, but they're not in a hurry because of a lot of uncertainty, and maybe that comes from the top down within the organization. And other factors could be that they are working through a cohort. And this is sort of on top of the first thing I mentioned. They're working through a cohort, and maybe that cohort doesn't pan out for whatever reason, and they have to go back to the drawing board and sort of build a new cohort. It's quite often that recruiters and job requisitions, um, they have cohorts that go through the funnel, right? So job posting is posted, a bunch of people apply, the recruiter goes through the stack, they identify a whatever, like it may be 5 people that they want to interview, they narrow it down to 3, and then maybe 3 are sort of going through the process as a cohort. And a lot of times, depending on the recruiter, depending on the process, the company, they may be having one cohort go through at a time, thinking that the hire is going to be in that cohort. But sometimes things go awry, and they're like, shoot, that cohort's not going to work out. We need to sort of start getting people in, right? And maybe that's as another discrete cohort, or sometimes they let people trickle in through to catch up with the first cohort. It just depends. So there's that dynamic. Typically, when I was doing a lot of hiring, it's not uncommon again, these are earlier stage companies. It's not uncommon for a process to be 2 to 3 weeks from first interview with that person or cohort to a decision. It doesn't hurt to ask, it doesn't hurt to ask about the process and try to get a sense of, how long is the process? And you can ask, you can try to get a sense too of, has there been a cohort of candidates that have been previously considered for this position? Those are legitimate questions, and they can give you a lot of insight into the process, how to navigate the process, and even how to manage and temper your expectations, right?
Yeah, that last comment's kind of interesting because I think you see a lot of jobs reposted on LinkedIn, and part of me is like, did they go through their first cohort and it didn't pan out, or did they buy some package with LinkedIn Premium and it's they're getting paid, they've paid to get the ad boosted 3 times or whatever. So I'm always trying to figure out how accurate and valid the LinkedIn information is about jobs. It feels like you see a lot of the same jobs for months and months and months and months and months.
Yeah. It could also be the case, again, this depends on the size of the organization and sort of are they sort of an interstate, multi-state
Mm.
company or even multinational company, right? Because sometimes there are roles that are either evergreen, right? They're always looking for, I don't know, mid-level developer or whatever, right? They're always looking for that because it's just the size of the company and the natural attrition. They just always have that opening, right? So that could be one consideration. Another consideration is sometimes companies will post jobs in different states or different cities to get a sense of sort of demand, and maybe they're even considering relocating a team to a different state. Or if it's remote, they might even be just gathering data around what people's salary expectations are, and or even what the talent pool will sustain given in a given city or state, right? And that might even be their intent, but they'll get that kind of data by just so a lot of times they might not even pull the job requisition down, especially if it's evergreen. They'll just leave it up. And so they might not be explicitly hiring for a specific like time frame, but they're just leaving it up to gather applicants. So all of those things are speculative, and you have to kind of, you have to weigh with what other signals you might be seeing.
Are there any job boards that you value the recruits that you see more than others, or you think do a better job of managing the job postings, or not?
That's
Or
an
is it
interesting.
always best to try to apply through the company?
No. So what I what I would recommend, if you see a job posting that you feel you'd be a great fit for and that you're interested in, what I would recommend is doing a little bit of homework, figuring out how long the position has been posted, if possible, figuring out where it's been posted, how long it's been posted, try and get a feel for who might own that job requisition from a recruiting standpoint, and then from a hiring manager standpoint, checking to see if you know anybody, even if it's second degree, at that company that could help you navigate, get some insight, or even at best, maybe they have direct line of sight to somebody that has influence there, Or maybe they themselves have the influence, right? Maybe they're on the team, maybe they're the hiring person, right? So I would do that homework to see if, who you have there, who you can connect with, sort of the side door, back door. I would apply to the front door. It doesn't hurt, right? But you have to temper your expectations. If all you do is apply to the front door and you think, oh, I'm the perfect fit, I'm going to get a call back, you might be selling yourself short and your expectations might be a little too lofty, right? So it doesn't hurt to apply to the front door. It only hurts if you think that that's all you need to do and you're going to get a call back in a week. Like, because then your expectations are high and you're going to get let down. So you have to take sort of a multi-pronged approach to it. If there's a recruiter that you know of already that either works in that region or that area, or if they even work with that client, that's fewer and far between, right? But if you happen to know a recruiter, maybe have a relationship with them and they're already working with that company, that's a great place to start, right? And that is a situation where I would perhaps not apply through the front door. So again, that's fewer and far between. So the condition is, or the case is, if you know a recruiter, you already have a relationship with them, that recruiter is working with that company that you're interested in. In that situation, go talk to the recruiter first. Do not apply to the front door. The reason being is, and I'm talking about an external recruiter, not the recruiter at the company. If they're a recruiter that is an employee W-2 of the company and you know them, by all means, go talk to them. And by all means, it usually doesn't hurt to apply either in that situation. But the case that I'm talking about is a case where you have a relationship with a third-party external recruiter that happens to be working with that company. Do not apply to the company until you've talked to the recruiter. The reason being is there's a thing called claim. And these third-party recruiters, who are often contingent, they don't make any money until the candidate that they own claim to, that they procure, is hired. So if they can secure claim on you as a candidate and represent you, submit you, and champion you to the client, they get claim on you. And then if you get hired, they get a paycheck, right? They get a commission. So that's a situation where I wouldn't apply directly. I would talk to the recruiter and say, hey, it looks like you're working with this company. I'm really interested. I think I'd be a great fit. Is there a way that you can represent me, or how can you help me navigate this process? And assuming what you say is true, excuse me, that they do work with that company and you do have you would be a strong candidate, that recruiter would be very excited to talk with you and they'd be very excited to represent you.
Thank you. And I know we're past time. Is it ever worth our while to do easy applies? Part just to like, oh, I applied to 4 jobs today.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's some benefit in feeling productive, right? And I don't want to minimize that, but at the same time, you have to temper your expectations around that, because a lot of those applications fall flat unless you're doing some of the other things that I mentioned, right? But easy apply, if you the way that job requisitions are sort of syndicated, a lot of times a job requisition is created on the employer's ATS system, and depending on the ATS system that they have, a lot of times they're connected to these different channels, LinkedIn, Indeed, whatever, and they can easily sort of syndicate that job requisition to these different channels. And so, a lot of these job boards now, they have, their version of Easy Apply. A lot of times you already have your resume built into that and you see a position you like, hit the button, and it basically sends your application or your resume to that ATS system, and the recruiter gets it. And so I don't see any drawback to, again, it's equivalent to applying to the front door. I think you did ask a question earlier about, like, is there a difference between, let's say, Indeed or LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever? A lot of times they just aggregate. A lot of times they just aggregate anyway into their ATS system. Depending on how the ATS system is set up, depending on sort of the motion that the recruiter has, it will likely get seen anyway. So if the question is, should I apply through LinkedIn or should I go to the website and apply there? Usually it'll end up in the ATS anyway. If I had to make a choice, maybe I would bias a little bit for going to the company website and applying there. But again, it really depends on how the recruiter's motion is, and you don't really have too much visibility into that. I guess there might be things that you can infer. Yeah. Again, you gotta have to, I mean, there's sort of it's sort of like the whole keyword thing on your resume, right? You can spend a lot of time on optimizing the number of keywords on your resume. I tell people, yeah, go through that process once, maybe twice, but like at some point, like there's no need to kind of get it from 98% to 99%, right? Go spend your time networking. Go spend your time recreating. You can't be doing job search day in, day out, 40 hours a week, for like months at a time. You're gonna go crazy, right? Especially now, because a lot of people are doing a lot of stuff, and I would argue they're doing the right things, but they're not seeing traction. And that could be that could be one of the most frustrating situations to be in, is you're doing the right things, but either things are just so slow and they're not converting, and then you just start questioning your own sanity. Like, am I doing the right things here? So anyway, this whole thing is sort of an exercise of like figuring out how to allocate your energy and your attention, and I wouldn't say there's a silver bullet for it, especially right now. So temper your expectations. You guys are everyone's in good company right now. There's a lot of great talent out there. I think a lot of folks are doing the right things. I mean, again, a lot of it is just sort of managing your own expectations and your own energy. So for maybe the longer haul. The other thing I want to mention too is that there's a bit of a moving target that's going on here, and it's sort of that elephant in the room is the AI thing, right? Because what it means to be a graphic designer a year ago, 2 years ago, to today, to tomorrow, it's moving. It's a moving target. So I don't know if I have all the answers for it, as far as that. But I think one thing I would suggest is just sort of reevaluating like your craft, your profession, your domain in light of how these emerging new technologies and tools could make you more effective, more proficient, more creative, more productive in your discipline, in your function. I think that goes for everybody, not just graphic designers. It cuts across software engineers, finance, marketing, sales, everything. So, yeah.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate your questions.
Yeah.
All right, I think that's all I've got today. Unless anybody has a sort of a last minute question, happy to entertain it, but we can always wait for next week.
Thank you.
All right, thanks,
No
Laura.
problem.
Have a nice weekend.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.